Hello guys and welcome to the Unreal Engine 5 Complete Beginner Tutorial. This beginner tutorial is intended for the complete beginner who is looking to get started using Unreal Engine 5, whether that be for creating things like short films, games, or whatever you might use the engine for. In this video, we'll cover how you can download and install Unreal Engine 5. We'll cover the bare basics like the user interface and all the basic viewport controls. We'll cover over how you can manipulate objects using the move, rotate, and scale tools. We'll go over how you can get assets into Unreal Engine through various different means. We'll cover over some of the basic sub-editors in Unreal Engine like the materials and blueprints, and the purpose of this video is just to build you a strong foundation in using the engine. That way you have all the basic knowledge you need to start using Unreal Engine 5. And in the next video, that will be a follow-up to this one, we are going to dive into more in-depth systems to some of the things that you actually learn in this beginner tutorial. So make sure that you subscribe for that video. I'm currently trying to hit over 200,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and if you don't want to miss out on any future Unreal Engine content, make sure that you hit that little bell icon. Also, if this video did help you out and you enjoyed it, perhaps you might want to learn some more. I have some premium courses on my website that you can check out at smartpoly.teachable.com. I'll leave a link to it in the description below. If you're specifically looking to make games inside of Unreal Engine, luckily for you, I have a complete first-person multiplayer survival game course where I teach you how to make a complete survival game from scratch and from start to finish. I will also be adding more other courses on my website for those folks who aren't necessarily interested in making games, courses like how to make realistic environments in Unreal Engine, and so much more. So check out my premium courses on smartpoly.teachable.com. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into the video. Alright, so the first thing that we'll need to do is download the Epic Games Launcher. So if you already have the Epic Games Launcher downloaded, you can go ahead and skip ahead. But if not, you'll head over to the link in the description below, and you'll go over here to get the Epic Games Store. You'll click Install on Windows, or whatever operating system you're using. That will go ahead and download the installer file. And if you don't have an Epic Games account, you'll need to create one. So just go ahead and click Sign In over here. And then you're going to go ahead and click Create an Account and just walk through these different steps. Now, once it's finished downloading the Epic Games installer, you just go ahead and run this and go through all the different steps and then sign in with your Epic Games account that you just created. So once you're logged in and open up the Epic Games Launcher, you'll be greeted with the store page. The store page is where you can actually purchase games similar to Steam. Over here on the left, we have a library tab. This is, again, related to the store. So if you purchase games from the Epic Games Store, your games will appear in the library. Now, what we're actually interested in are these two tabs down here at the bottom, the Unreal Engine tab. So let's go ahead and head over to there. So in the Unreal Engine tab at the top, we have multiple different sub tabs. So let's go ahead and explain these right now. The first one that we're in is the News tab, which shows us relevant news to Unreal Engine. So you can see we just had the State of Unreal, which is the yearly event where they talk about new features and updates coming to Unreal Engine. Okay, we have some quick links to news, the YouTube channel, Q&A, and the forums, as well as the Unreal Engine roadmap right here. To the right of the News tab, we have the samples. So if you click on this, this will show us various different sample projects that you can actually use alongside of Unreal Engine. So we have a game animation sample. So if you're interested in creating games, this is a great starting project. We have other different projects down here that you can check out. And again, these are just for learning and digging apart and seeing how Epic themselves have made certain different things. To the right of the Samples tab, we have the Library tab. This is actually where we're going to be installing Unreal Engine and opening the editor, as well as opening your own projects when you've created some projects. So right now down here under My Projects, you're not going to see any projects because this is your very first time. But once you start creating some projects and using the engine, you're going to have your projects show up down here. Now to the right of the Library tab, we have Twinmotion. Twinmotion is basically real-time architectural visualization tool for Unreal Engine. If you're interested in this, you can go ahead and check it out. We're not going to be covering this in this video. To the right of that, we have the Reality Scan tab. Reality Scan is for photo capturing real world objects and converting them into 3D models. So again, if this is another program you're interested in, you can go ahead and install that. But again, we're not covering that in this tutorial. Now that is the Unreal Engine tab. We're going to be coming back here in a second, but below the Unreal Engine tab is the Fab tab. So if we go ahead and click on here, this is going to take us over to the Fab page. And basically Fab is a marketplace of 3D models, asset packs, character models, environments, all sorts of stuff that you can use with Unreal Engine, You can also use it for Unity and other game engines as well. But basically, this is like the marketplace that sells different types of 3D assets for your games and Unreal Engine projects. Okay, we're going to come back to this later on, but just note that it exists here in the launcher. So now let's go ahead and actually install Unreal Engine. So you'll want to head over to the Unreal Engine tab and over to Library. And over here we have two different ways we can install a new engine version. We can either click on the plus icon over here, or we can click Install Engine up here at the top. So let's go ahead and click on the plus icon, and it's going to automatically assign us the most recent version of Unreal Engine, which in this case is 5.8.0. Let's go ahead and actually take a second to talk about the version numbering, because not a lot of people actually cover this. So the first number in this version is the major version. Basically, we have major engine versions like Unreal Engine 4, then we have Unreal Engine 5, and then we have Unreal Engine 6. So this first number represents the major version, which introduces major features. In Unreal Engine 5, they introduce things like Lumen and Nanite, all those different features. So that is what the first number represents. Now, the second number is the minor version. Basically, we can hit the drop down and you'll see that the first version of Unreal Engine 5 was 5.0.3. Okay, then it went up to 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, all the way up to 5.8. So you can see that there are technically 9 different versions of Unreal Engine since we started at 5.0 all the way up to 5.8. So this minor version basically represents any new experimental features added to the engine. So for example, in 5.1, they added enhanced input system. In 5.2, they added the PCG or procedural content generation. In 5.5, they added things like megalites. So each minor version, they add new features to the engine and also performance improvements. Okay, now the last number in this version is the patch version. So if you hit the drop down, right now we're on 5.8.0. So there have been 0 patch updates for this version. Now, if you hit the drop down and look, you can see that 5.7 received 4 patch updates. Okay, now this patch number typically doesn't really matter as much as the minor version. Okay, so if you're watching tutorials that are recorded in 5.8.0, and maybe down the road, this number will change to 5.8.4. Just note that it's the same exact version. There have just been some patch updates applied to that version. Okay, so now that we've gone over the different version numbers, again, you can hit the drop down if you want to select another version, maybe an older version, or if you even want to go to Unreal Engine 4 versions, you can download that. But we're going to stick with the latest, which is 5.8.0. So now let's just click Install button. Now it's going to prompt us where we want to choose the install location. So the default will be on our C drive. We'll just leave that as the default. However, there are some more additional options. So if we click on the options here, just notice that currently we have these different components checked. We want to leave that as the defaults, but we do have an additional options that we can check and enable, which is the MetaHuman Creator Core Data. So metahumans are Unreal Engine's realistic humanoid characters. If you want to use the MetaHuman tools and plugins, you'll need to go ahead and enable this to include the core data when you download and install the engine. Now note, if you don't hit that checkbox and you want to add it later on, you could always come back and add this to your engine install. Okay, so you don't have to worry about missing it. Also down here we have target platforms. So if you want to package your game or your project for these different platforms, you can go ahead and include those different binaries. So we're going to go ahead and just close out of there, and we're just going to click the install button. So now that we've clicked the install button, it's going to go ahead and start initializing and downloading Unreal Engine 5.8. So we'll just come back to when this is finished, and this might take quite a bit depending on how fast your internet speed is. All right, so we're back and it just finished downloading. So what you go ahead and do is click this launch button over here, and it's going to start installing the prerequisites. So it might pop open with the window. You'll just click yes and install those. And if it asks for access, just click allow. And it should go ahead and start launching the Unreal Editor. All right, so once you've launched Unreal Engine 5.8 for the very first time, you're going to be granted with the project launcher. So this is the project launcher. And as you can see over here on the left, we have a couple of different options and a couple of different tabs. So very first, let's start over with the Home tab. So click on the Home. Home is going to show you if you have any recent projects. So if this is your very first time, you're not going to see any projects in here. But if you created some projects before, they will show up in this section. Now below the Home tab, we have the News tab. So again, this is similar to the launcher where you have different Unreal Engine news. Then we have the Getting Started tab. So this is just the quick resources for beginners. We have the sample projects. So again, very similar to the launcher. We just have links to download the different game sample projects. And then below that, we have some quick links to the forums, documentations, tutorials, roadmap, and release notes. Also down here, we just have social media links, and that is basically the project creation window. Now up here at the top, we have two different buttons. We can either create a new project or we can open up a previous project. For us, we're going to create a new project, so we'll click the Create New Project, and it's going to pop open with this new window where we can create a new Unreal Engine project. Now in this window has separate tabs as well. We have a tab for games, film, video, and live events, architecture, automotive, and simulation. So as you can see, as we select the different categories here, you'll notice that there are different templates depending on what category you select. So for us, we're going to select the games category. However, you can select another category, but I recommend just following along with this tutorial. It's the same engine. All that these different templates do is that they provide a nice starting point for that specific category. So for us, we're going to choose games. I'm going to choose the third person template. As you can see, there's a couple of different game templates in here. We have a first person shooter game. We have a third person fighting game, top down game, even a racing game over here. Now we're going to choose third person. And over here on the right, we have some details about the game, but we also have a couple of different settings. And the main things that you need to know is that we can choose whether or not we want a blueprint or a C++ project. Blueprints are the visual scripting system of Unreal Engine. We'll touch more about this later on. And C++ is the coding language of the engine. You can make games with Blueprint, visual scripting, without having to write any C++, and that's one of the powerful features of Unreal Engine. Now below it, we have target platform, so you can choose either desktop or mobile. We'll leave that as desktop. Also, quality preset, you can change this from maximum to scalable. And again, all of these different settings you can change later on in the engine itself, so they don't really necessarily matter that much. Below it, we have variant. Now what this basically means is in the third person, we have other different third person templates. So if you hit the drop down, we have none. So this will give us a basic third person template with no variant. But we also have a combat variant, a platforming variant, a side scroller, and all, if we want all the variants. These are basically just separate templates. So if you want a combat fighting template, all of that stuff. And again, if you were to select the first person template, if you wanted this first person shooter template, you would select the arena shooter variant. Okay. For us, we're going to select the third person and just click none. So we don't have any variants. I've made a separate video on these different templates and all the separate variants, so you can check it out. But down here, we have the project name and where it's located on our hard drive. So you can choose a project location. I've set mine to my E drive. And over here on the project name, you can rename this to, our first project, something like that. And then just click the create button. And now what it'll do is it'll go ahead and launch Unreal Engine 5.8, the Unreal Editor. And if this is your very first time, again, it might take quite a bit because it'll need to compile all the necessary shaders. All right, so we just created and opened up our very first project. Let's go ahead and talk about what you are seeing here on the screen. And first talk about the viewport. So the viewport is this center window that you see here. To move and navigate around the viewport, you just use the WASD keys while holding down the right mouse button. So hold down the right mouse button and use the WASD keys to move around. So if I look down, we can move forward. If I look up, we can move up like that. We also have the selection tool. So I have this little plus icon. If I click, I can actually select objects inside of the viewport. So as you can see, I'm clicking on this ramp, and we know it's selected because it has this yellow outline highlighting it, but also we have this little gizmo tool. So let's go ahead and actually talk about this little gizmo tool. So in order to do that, let's go ahead and just add a simple cube to our level. So for the sake of explaining the movement gizmo, let's just add a simple cube. So to add a cube, just click this cube plus icon. We'll talk about this later, but just click the cube plus icon, go down to shapes, and add a simple cube to our level. So now we have a cube. Let's go ahead and talk about this movement gizmo. So this is the movement gizmo. Basically, it has 3 different arrows for each axis. So we have a red arrow. So if we hover over the red arrow and grab it and drag, you can see that we can move the cube back and forth on this x-axis. And the reason why we know that it's the x-axis is that it's color-coded in red, but also down here on the bottom of our screen, we have a little guide that shows us which direction is which. So red stands for X. We have Y, so if we hover over the green arrow, we can move the cube in the Y direction, back and forth. We also have the blue arrow, which we can move the cube up or down in the Z direction. Now what you'll notice is when we move the cube, we have this guide, so it shows us how far we're actually moving the cube, how many centimeters or how many meters we're moving the cube by, but also these centimeters and meters are the actual units used inside of Unreal Engine. So those are the 3 different movement tools. We do have these different boxes in between each of these different axes, and what those do is it allows us to, if we hover over and drag, we can move the cube in 2 different axes at the same time. Okay, so we can move it like that, we can move it on the Z and X, or we can also move it on the Z and Y, just like that. Okay, so that is the movement gizmo tool. Next up, let's talk about the rotation tool. So press E to switch over to the rotation tool. And now we've seen that the gizmo changes to this sphere. So let's talk about this sphere gizmo. I don't know if you can see this in the video, but we have the 3 different colors. We have the green circle, we have the red circle, and then over here in the center, we have the blue circle. So if we hover over the circle, we can rotate the cube in that axis. So this green circle represents the y-axis. We can rotate it. We can also hover over the red and rotate it in the x, or hover down here on the blue and rotate it on the z-axis. You'll notice when I rotate the cube, it shows us how many degrees we're rotating this by. So I can rotate it positive 90 degrees, or I can rotate it negative 90 degrees. Okay, so it's very nice that it includes that amount. Also, we have this outer circle over here, which allows us to rotate the cube based on which direction we're facing the camera. So if I look at the cube from this direction, I can rotate it like so. Okay, so this is just a very neat little tool. So that is the rotation gizmo. You can rotate the object in any direction. Now let's move on to the next gizmo, which is the scaling gizmo. So to move over to the scaling gizmo, press R on your keyboard, and now we can see that we have these 3 different colored boxes. We have the red box, the green box, and the blue box. So again, we can hover over the red box and scale this in the x-axis. We could scale it in the y, or we can scale it up and down with the z. We also have these different boxes in between axes. So if we want to scale the cube in both axes at the same time, the x and y, or the x and z, we could do so. But additionally, we can hover over the center sphere and scale the cube up uniformly in all axes at the same time. So that's pretty neat. Now to switch back over to movement, we press W. To switch to rotation, we press E. To switch to scaling, we press R. Those are the different hotkeys. W for movement, E for rotation, and R for scale. Additionally, you can switch the different modes over here in the viewport. So let's go ahead and actually talk about some of these different buttons over here at the top of the viewport. So over here, we have a couple of different viewport related settings. You can see if we click over here, we have the different hotkeys that we just discussed, but we can also switch to the selection mode. So if we want to select objects, we can click on this cursor icon. But we can also select the movement gizmo if we want to move objects around. We have the rotation gizmo if we want to switch over to rotation, or the scaling gizmo if we want to scale an object. So again, these are the hotkeys, W, E, and R. But to the right of it, we have this local space coordinates. So what this little icon does, let's say we want to go ahead and rotate this cube, and we rotate it like this angle. Then we want to go ahead and move this cube right over to this position. Okay, we could move it by doing 2 different actions, like so. Or what we could do is we could switch over from this world space, which is this globe icon, to the local space. which is this cube icon. And now what it does is you'll notice that it automatically orientates the movement gizmo tool to the orientation of the object. So if we have our cube rotated like this, we can now move it at this angle, which makes it very nice for laying out objects. So this world space and local space basically orientates the gizmo to whatever orientation the object is facing. Okay, now to undo any changes in the editor, let's say we accidentally move this all the way over here, we can do Control Z on our keyboard to undo those actions, okay? And that will go ahead and reset it. Now to the right of the world space coordinates, we have this snapping settings. Snapping settings allow us to control object snapping onto the ground. We can toggle whether or not we want objects to snap to surfaces as we drag them into the editor. And then to the right of that, we have these three different movement and rotation and scaling tools. So what you might have noticed already in our editor is when I move this cube, we can only move it about 10 centimeters. We can't move it any amount less than that. You can see it has a snapping behavior. And the reason why that is doing it is because we can actually turn off grid snapping. Okay, so we have grid snapping enabled. Right now we can click on that little blue icon and it changes to white. And now we can move this cube much more smoother, and we can move it by any unit we'd like. We also have rotation snapping. So if we rotate this object, press E to rotate, you can see we can only rotate it by 10 degrees. So if we want to turn off rotation snapping, now we can move this cube nice and smooth and get that precise rotation. Also, what we can do is if we want to enable grid snapping, we could also adjust how much the snap value is. So let's say if I want to move this cube uniformly, like with a pattern, I can adjust the grid snapping so that it will snap by 50 units or maybe up to 500 units, just like this, if I wanted to lay out a couple of objects with even spacing, okay? Same for the rotation snapping. If I go in the rotation tool, I can change the degrees by which I rotate an object. To the right of that, we have the scale snapping. So if I go into scale mode by pressing R, I can turn off the grid snapping, and now I can scale the cube nice and smooth, or I can turn it on and adjust the snapping sizes. Okay, so those are the different snapping sizes. Now to the right of that, we have the perspective, the camera mode. Currently, it's in the perspective mode, which allows us to fly around the viewport. However, there are additional different viewport modes. So if we look in the drop down here, we have the top view. So if we click on top, we get this top-down view of our level, which is very useful for laying out assets and doing level design. We also have a bottom view and a left view of our level, right, front, and back. Okay, now let's go back to our perspective. Additionally, we have other different controls in here, like we can adjust the field of view of our camera and much more, but we're just going to go over the basics. To the right of this, we have the camera movement speed. So what you might have noticed is in the level, I can zoom around, but this is very slow. Let's say I have a massive open world map and I want to get across from one side of the map to the other. We can adjust the camera speed by clicking this icon and adjusting the speed, and that will allow us to move faster within the level. Of course, if I want to get up real close to this cube and inspect it, I'll need to adjust and decrease my camera speed. Another thing is you can control the speed by using the hotkey, which is the mouse middle wheel. So if you hold down right click and scroll down, you can make this speed slower. If you hold down the right mouse button and scroll up, you can make it faster. So this is a very nice hotkey to use to adjust the camera speed. To the right of that, we have the different lit mode and view modes in the editor. So we have this lit mode, which allows us to see all the lights and everything in our level. However, we can switch to a unlit mode. Now this will show us our level without any detail lighting. And I find this mode very useful if you're running Unreal Engine on a low-end computer that struggles to get a high frame rate. You can go ahead and turn off all the lighting, and this will go ahead and boost your performance and allow you to use Unreal Engine while not having the best PC in the world. Below it, we have wireframe, which shows us this sort of X-ray view of our level. This is very useful for seeing the geometry of all the 3D models in our level. Below that, we have other different lighting modes like detail lighting, reflections. Collision is also a very important thing. If you're making games in Unreal Engine, the player collision is one of the most important things. There's other different types of V modes down here, but again, as you learn more of Unreal Engine, you'll become more familiar with some of these different V modes. Okay, those are just the basics. Let's go back to the lit mode, and now to the right of that, let's talk about the show flags. So this little icon allows us to show or hide various different objects in our level. So for example, if I wanted to hide the atmosphere, if I wanted to hide things like the clouds, if I wanted to hide the grid is this little grid over here. If we look down, you'll notice that we have this little transparent grid. So if you want to hide that little grid, you can go ahead and disable it by clicking it like so. We have other different show flags, like we can hide the landscape, particle systems, skeletal meshes, static meshes, all that stuff. To the right of it, we have the performance settings. This is also a very important button because we can change the viewport scalability. Down here, we have viewport scalability. Currently, we have the epic quality setting for our view distance, post-processing, shadows, reflections, textures. Let's say you don't have the strongest PC. You can go in here and set this all to low. And also you can lower the screen percentage, okay? And what that will go ahead and do is it should boost your performance in the editor and help with your frame rate. Okay, if you want to reset back to the defaults, you can click on this little reset icon, and that will go ahead and reset it all back to the epic scalability. So you guys can go ahead and mess around with these settings to see if it helps your editor performance. To the right of that, we have another settings gear icon. This allows us to control the volume in our editor, and it has a couple of other different settings in here, like the sensitivity. And then finally, we have the viewport layout. So this little window icon, if we click on it, will open up a quad view of our level. So we have over here a top view. So if I go over here and click and zoom, scroll in and out, we can zoom in and out. You can hold down the right mouse button to pan around and scroll in and out like so. Okay, you can select objects in here. And then over here on the right, we have the perspective mode. So you can go ahead and fly around in here. And then to the bottom left, we have the front view. And the bottom right, we have the right view. These are separate viewports, so technically you can adjust and change this to perspective, to a different view mode. You can also change the different lighting modes and all that stuff. This is very helpful for, again, laying out and doing level design if you want to see multiple layouts of your level. Now over here, we're going to switch back to our viewport by clicking on the icon again, and we can toggle that on or off like so. Additionally, you could choose different layouts. So we have the 1-pane layout, 2 panes, or we can choose up to 3, 4, 5, and much more. Okay, so we're going to go back to the default just like so. So those are the basic viewport controls up here at the top. Let's talk a little bit more about editor viewport actions. So in the editor here, if we select this cube, there's a couple of other keys that you need to be familiar with. First, we can duplicate objects by doing Control-C and Control-V. That will copy and paste an object that we have selected. So I can select this cube, Control-C, Control-V. That will copy and paste. Okay, you can also delete objects by clicking the Delete key, selecting an object and deleting it. And also another thing that you can do is you can undo actions. So if I press R and scale up this cube like so, I can do Control-Z to undo that action. Some other hotkeys to be familiar with is if I move this cube up in the air, if I press the End key on my keyboard, it will go ahead and snap that object down to the closest surface. So the End key is for snapping objects. Another key that beginners might accidentally hit is the G key. So if you press the G key, you might not see any movement gizmo. Okay, the G key allows us to go into this game view where it hides all sorts of editor utility icons. So, all of these little icons over here, it will hide it in this game view. Now, game view is very nice if you want to see what it looks like in game, especially if you want to just take a screenshot of your level. Also, another very useful shortcut or hotkey is If you're far away from an object, and if you select that object and press F, that will allow you to focus in on an object. So if you're very far away, you want to move very quickly over to this object, you just press F on your keyboard, and that will go ahead and focus you in. And probably one of the last important hotkeys that I use a lot is when you're duplicating objects, you don't need to copy and paste objects like that. You can actually use the hotkey Alt. So hold down Alt and drag. That will go ahead and duplicate an object. So just select it, hold down Alt, click the arrow and drag, and that will duplicate it out like so. All right, so now let's go ahead and talk about the top menu up here at the very top. So starting at the very top left, we have the file menu. So file menu, we can create things like new levels. We'll cover over that later on in the video. Down here, we have our save options. So if you want to save everything, I recommend doing save all. And then below that, we have export and import options if we want to import or export any assets. Below that, we have options for creating new projects and, of course, exit. To the right of that, we have the edit menu. This has some very important things like undo and redo. But at the very bottom here, we have configuration settings for our project. We have things like the editor preferences. So if we open this up, this will open up the editor preferences where we can adjust things like the theme. We can adjust colors of our gizmo and other various different things. Then over here we have under the configuration, we also have keyboard shortcuts. So if you want to view all the different shortcuts as well as add your own custom shortcuts, you can go ahead and do so through there. And then we also have project settings. This is also a very important window because you can change things like the project thumbnail, the name, description, copyright notice. Also, there's a lot of different settings for the engine, the game, export settings, editor settings, platform settings. So if you're going to be making games inside of Unreal Engine, or really just using Unreal Engine, chances are you will be coming here often to change different project settings. And again, you'll just be more familiar with these project settings as you start using the engine more and more. Next up below that, we have the plugins. So if you open up the plugins, basically in Unreal Engine, there's 852 built-in plugins. So plugins extend the editor and add more different features. There's a bunch of built-in plugins for AI, audio, animation, all sorts of different things. So when you have some time, you can scroll through some of these plugins and see if there's anything that interests you. So that's the edit menu. To the right of it, we have the window. So basically, if you accidentally close a window, let's say, for example, we close this over here. We accidentally close a window. So we go back to window over here, and you can show that window that you closed. Now, if you don't know exactly which window you closed, you just come over here, and we can load the default editor layout right here. And what that will do is it will reopen the default editor layout just like that, okay? So if you accidentally close a window, you can just go back to window, open that particular window, or load the default editor layout. To the right of that, we have different tools. So there's a bunch of built-in tools, but mainly the main ones in here is if you are using Unreal Engine and C++, this is where you could create a new C++ class. There's other different types of tools like merging actors. We have the build menu. So if you're building things like lighting, if you're using static lighting, building collision, geometry, all sorts of stuff, the build settings are in here. Okay. To the right of that, we have platforms. So this is what you'd actually use to ship your project, upload it to Steam, or send it to a friend, or, package the project so that your client can mess around with the demo that you've built. Okay, so we have, package project, and then we have the different platforms that you can package for. All right, to the right of that, we have the select. So this is just like a basic select menu. So you could select all assets by using Control A. You can unselect by pressing Escape, and you can select objects by type. Okay. To the right of that, we have actor. So this little menu gets shown if we actually select something. So let's say we select this cube and then go over to actor. You can see that we have a bunch of asset options. Okay, we can edit it, browse to where it's located. We can set the visibility, group it. Lots of different options here. Okay. To the right of that, we have help. So help basically has some quick links to the documentation. We have the forms, Q&A, and we also have things like report a bug. So that is the basic menus up here at the top. Now below that we have this little home icon. This just brings you to the home panel. I'm not really fond of this. I don't really use this at all. Maybe this might be useful for you. Then to the right of that we have the level third person. So if you click on a tab, like for example, if I open up the editor preferences window, and we can actually dock this window at the top. So if it opens like this, you can actually take this window and dock it at this top tab, and you can switch between the level. This is our level third person, which is the level that we're currently in, and we can switch between the different windows like so. So basically this just shows us the name of the level that we're currently in. Okay, now below that we have the save button. So this saves the current level to the disk. This is just the current level. So if we make some changes, like move this cube around, we could save the current level. However, if you make other changes in your project that's not within this level, you want to do the file save all. Okay, very important to do a save all because it will prevent you from having to redo a lot of work. To the right of that, we have this browse icon. So this just finds where this level is located in our content browser. And we'll talk more about the content browser here in a second. To the right of that, we have the different editor modes. So right now we're in the selection mode, which allows us to select different objects. However, if we hit the drop down, you can see that there are many other different types of modes. We have things like landscape mode. So if I click the landscape mode, this will allow us to build landscapes. So you can see we have this little grid. Basically, landscapes are terrain like mountains, hills. You can build all sorts of worlds with landscapes, okay? And you can see we have a landscape panel over here. Now, below that we have foliage. Foliage mode is used for painting trees, rocks, and that way you don't have to manually place each individual tree. You can paint it sort of like using a paintbrush in Photoshop. Below that we have things like mesh paint, so you can paint onto different meshes. We have modeling. You can actually model inside of the engine. Fracture mode is used for creating things like destructible meshes. So if you want destruction in your game, or if you want to create a destructible asset for your film, you can go there. We have brush editing. This is kind of used for blocking out BSP geometry, like basic shapes and stuff like that. It's kind of an older system. I don't really use this that much. Animation mode is for creating things like animations, animating in the editor. We have PCG, which allows you to procedurally spawn in trees, forests, all sorts of stuff. You can even make buildings and cities with PCG. So those are all the different modes. Again, we can switch back to the selection mode just like so. And again, I'll be making separate videos for these different modes so you guys can learn them. But for the sake of time, we're going to cover those in a separate video. To the right of that, we have the Cube Plus icon. So this allows you to add content to your project. So you have different options to import content. We have the content browser. So again, we'll talk more about that later. We have some basic types of actors that we can place. So we have like a character, a light, a player start. If we actually look in our level, we have this little player start over here, which is a little capsule. This is basically where the player starts. I'll show you guys what I mean by that here in a second, but we have basically just different types of shapes like cubes, spheres, cones, cinematic things like a cinematic camera, visual effects like sky, atmosphere, volumetric clouds, basic geometry, different types of volumes like a kill volume. These are more for games. And then we have all assets. So the neat thing about all is that you can just type up here and search for cube, and then you can get it right there. And then of course recent will just show you the recent types of assets that you've used. Okay, so to the right of the Cube Plus icon, we have this level blueprint. So this allows us to create a new blueprint class, also allows us to open the level blueprint. It's very powerful and we'll talk about it near the end of the video. And then next to it, we have this level sequence. So sequences and level sequence allow you to actually create things like animations, but also short films, movies, and cinematics for your game. Then lastly, over here, we have this little toolbar. Over here, we have the green play icon. So if we click on this, this will allow us to actually play our game. So remember how we created a third-person template? Well, if we just right-click into here, we can now control our character, which is the third-person character template. So we can move our mouse around, which moves the camera around. We have our WASD keys. We can even jump by pressing the space bar, and we can press escape, and that will exit out of the play mode. So the green play icon just allows us to actually play and test out our game. To the right of that button, we have the advanced single frame. Now, if we're actually playing in the game, you can press Shift and F1, and that will give you your mouse cursor. That will allow you to pause the game. You can go to the next frame, which will advance the game. You can press Stop to end. You can also press Escape as well. You could also do Eject, which detaches you from the character, which allows you to kind of fly around. You can also click this Re-Control, which allows you to re-control the game, okay? And then finally, we have the 3 dots icon. So this allows you to change the play mode. Currently, we can play this game in the viewport, but we also have the option to play it in a new editor window. So if we select that, you're going to see that it creates this new pop-out window where I can play my game inside of it. I kind of like this sometimes because I think it's just a nicer layout, but you can see it changed the default setting, so we could set that back to selected viewport as well. It just depends on your preference. We also, if you're making a VR game, you can preview this with VR. We have standalone game and standalone mobile. So this is like if you were to run your game as the EXE. Okay, we have simulate. Simulate is very nice because we can simulate our world. So if you're doing some sort of physics simulation, or if you just want to see how actors and NPCs walk around the level, you can simulate your game by clicking the simulate button. We also have a couple of options of where we want to spawn our player at. We can spawn at the default player start. Remember, we have this player start over here, but we can change this to current camera location. So let's say if we want to spawn over here and hit play, it will spawn our character over here. Okay, again, you can change that back to the default player start. Now, we do have a couple of other options down here, but this is for multiplayer games. So number of players, you can increase this to, 4 or 5, all the way up to there. We have just 1 player. Net mode, we have currently standalone, which is like single player, but you have options for listen server and client. So again, this is more to do with multiplayer. And if you guys are interested in making, multiplayer games or experiences, I have some multiplayer courses on my website. So those are the basic menu options on the left. Over on the right, we have the name of our project. And if you actually hover over this, it will show us the version of the project. It will show us the build date, the graphics, RHI, which kind of just shows us some technical information about the project. We also have the minimize, maximize, and basically exit buttons. Now below that, we're going to talk about the world outliner next. So basically this window over here. Now, if you want to move this window, make it larger, you can hover in between like the viewport and the outliner, and you can click and drag to resize things. I'm just going to do that for this bar over here and then this bar down here. So this world outliner, basically the world outliner shows us a list of all of the different assets that are placed and spawned into our level. So if I go ahead and select this cube, for example, you're going to see in the list, it highlights the name of the object we have selected. So we have this cube, and it also shows us the object type. So in this case, it's a static mesh actor. Okay, static mesh is basically an object that is static. It doesn't move, and it doesn't have any sort of logic attached to it. Okay, you can also see we can select objects in this list. So we have the different ramps, all of these different ramps. We can also shift select to select multiple objects. Okay. And we can also delete objects. So let's say I select this cube, or I select it from the list. I can delete it from the list like that. What's useful about the world outliner is, again, you can search through this list. So let's say I want to search for, that cube. I can find it. Well, this is actually one of the cubes. There's a lot of different cubes. This one down here is the one. And I can press F to focus in on it. Also, I could do search for the player start. Okay, there's only 1 player start in our game, so if I select it and press F, that will focus in on our player start. So the world outliner is very useful for selecting objects. You can also group objects. You can see you can create folders. We have the lighting over here. So if you want to adjust the lighting, you can select those different assets over there. And what you might notice when we actually select different objects, let's say we select this cube again, for example, is down here in the details panel. Okay, the details shows us various different details depending on what object we have selected in our level and our world outliner. So if we select the cube, you can see we have the name of the object, which is a cube. We have the different components, more on that later. But down here we have the different settings. So let's go ahead and move this window up here so we can see this. But basically we have the actual mesh. Here's the actual transform in the level. So this shows us the location of our cube, the X, Y, and Z coordinates. So we can actually adjust the location. So let's say if I drag this cube around, you'll notice that in the details panel, it's updating the location. Okay. Also, I can hover over here and manually drag, click and drag, and that will adjust the X, Y, or Z. We could also enter values. So let's say I enter in here 0, 0, and 0. That's going to put it at the coordinates 0, 0, 0, which happens to be right here. Okay, so that's basically how you can modify different details within the details window. Okay, we also have things like materials. So you can see right now it has this white material. But if I select this object over here, you can see that this object has this green material. All right. We have also other different details like physics. If we want to simulate physics, we have collision settings, lighting, and much more. Okay, so the details panel just shows us various different details depending on what object we have selected in our level. Now let's go ahead and talk about this bottom bar down here. Okay, this is the last part of the editor window that we need to discuss. So down here we have the content drawer. So if we click on this, this is going to pop open this content drawer window. Now if I select anywhere in the level, you can see that it goes away. So basically we can click on it and click anywhere and that will make it go away. Now basically the content drawer, or also known as the content browser, allows us to see all of the different assets that makes up our game. So remember how there are different objects in this level, like this cube, this cylinder, all of that is stored in this content drawer within these folders stored in our project. So we have the folder hierarchy over here on the left, which shows us all content. We have characters folder, so we can navigate through here. We can also click on the folders over here on the right. That will allow us to navigate. So we have, in the mannequins, we have animations. We can do rifle. And we have some rifle animations over here. Okay, we have pistol animations. We have death animations, unarmed. So we have all the different assets in here. Okay, so that's basically what the content browser is. It has all the different assets that make up our game. Okay, you can unexpand certain folders by clicking this down arrow. Let's actually talk about these different buttons over here at the top. So if we actually want to add content, we can add by clicking this plus icon. And this menu might look intimidating, but basically this allows us to add different types of assets into our content browser. Okay, you can also access the same exact menu by just right-clicking anywhere inside the content folder. And I'll talk about all the different asset types here in a bit. But to the right of that button, we have the import button. So again, if you want to import assets, you can click on this button. We have save all, which will save all of our changes. So just do save selected. And then we have the back and forward buttons. So if we want to go back out of the folder we're at, we can use these buttons to navigate back and forward. Also notice that we have this path over here that shows us the path of the folder that we're in. So all content level prototyping. We can go to meshes. And now we can see all the meshes that are used to build our level. Now down here below it, we have a search bar. So we can actually search for certain meshes. So let's say we go to our content folder and search for cube. It's going to show us the cube meshes in our content browser. Now, if you want to reset your search, you just click this X, okay? And that will go back to your normal view. Now, to the left of that, we have the filter button. Filter allows us to filter by asset. So let's say we want to find where the level is located, this third-person level. We just click the filter icon and filter by level. And now we can see that we're filtering by level. And we can find our third-person level over here. Okay, you can turn off the filter by toggling it on and off. And let's say you don't want to have any filters over here. You can go ahead and click the filter icon and disable that. So it gets rid of it. Now over here to the very right, we have a couple of different settings. So we can lock the content browser. I've never really used that, but it just, locks the current folder that you're in. We have dock and layout. This is actually very important. So if you click on dock and layout, what it does is it automatically attaches the content browser to a window like our details and outliner, just like this. And the reason why that's useful is because now if we right click in our level, it doesn't disappear any longer. Now we can close this. So if we want to close the content browser, we can click the X over there, and then we can always navigate back to it by clicking the content drawer and docking that in the layout. Okay. Another thing that we have here is this little gear icon. What this allows us to do is hide or show certain files like plugin content, engine content. So you might not have this engine folder over here. Basically, this has like plugins and C++ content. If you don't have that, you just go over here to this gear icon and you can enable or disable that, okay? I just have that enabled because sometimes there's additional content in these folders that you can use in your projects. And before we continue more about the content browser, let's just briefly cover over the rest of this bottom bar and get that out of the way. So we have the content drawer, we have the output log. This pops open a separate window that kind of shows us a terminal view of all of the processes that the engine is doing behind the scenes. And you could enter things like console commands to run certain commands. There's a list of commands on the documentation if you want to learn more about that, but that's the output log. We have CMD, so this basically allows us to enter a console command. Same thing with the output log. You can enter commands here. And then to the right of this, we have diagnostics. So this kind of just shows us some different stats about our editor, like usage, bug crashes, all that stuff. Next up, we have trace. So this allows us to save our project and profile our project if we want to actually test things like performance and run things like Unreal Insights, which allows us to kind of profile the performance of our project. And we have a couple of different buttons to start tracing and stop tracing, save, all that stuff. Next up, we have the Zen server. A Zen server basically is Unreal Engine's storing and caching system that runs in the background to help speed up tasks such as shader compilation, cooking, packaging, and asset loading. So this is just the server running in the background. We have all saved. So let's say we moved an object. You can see that we have one unsaved action. You can click on that icon, and it will prompt you to save selected, and you can see everything has been saved. We have revision control. Revision control allows you to back up your project, but also allows you to collaborate with other people, whether you're working on a team or working at a company, and they all need to be working on the same project at the same time. You can go and configure that through this button. Okay, so let's talk more about the content browser. We briefly discussed it. So in the content browser, this is where we can actually import assets and drag in assets to our level. So what I mean by that is if we expand this and go into level prototyping and go into, say, the meshes folder, we can drag in these assets into our level. All we have to do is drag and drop just like so. So we can drag in a cylinder, we can drag in this quarter cylinder, we can drag in this ramp. And if we have this selected, we can press R, and then we can now scale this up. We could select this Q over here and move this around, press E and rotate, scale this up, and basically we can start building out our level. So you can just grab whatever asset you want and place it in the level, move it around, scale it around, and that's how you would build out things using the content browser. Now, in the content browser itself, there are different types of assets in here, and we need to go over the asset types. So first, we have in here the most common asset types are, if we go into meshes, we have static meshes. So basically, static meshes are color-coded. All of the files in Unreal Engine and assets have their own color. So you'll notice that static mesh, it says down here at the bottom, static mesh, but it's also color-coded with this light blue color. Okay, so static meshes are very common. They make up, a large majority of your world, just different static objects. We also have things like materials. So in this folder, we have different materials. You'll notice that it says material here down at the bottom, but also it has this green color code. We also have things like material functions. These are used inside of materials. Okay, we have also material instances. So what are material instances? Well, basically you'll create a master material, and then you can create copies of that or instances that have different settings, okay? We have also textures. So in the textures folder, we have just a single texture, which is color-coded with the red, but also we can go in the characters folder and mannequins. Let's go into meshes over here. And you can see we also have character meshes, which are called skeletal meshes. Okay, so instead of a static mesh, this is a skeletal mesh, like a skeleton, because it has bones. So you can see this is sort of color coded with this purple. Then we also have a skeleton, which is the actual bones that make up the character model, and this is color coded with that light blue color. Okay, so those are some basic asset types. Okay, there's a lot more different types of assets, like this third person. As you can see, we have a level, which is color coded with the yellow. And if we just right click in a random folder, you'll notice that we have a lot more different types of assets. So let's go ahead and break down this window that you see here. We have, a search, so we can search through whatever asset we want to create. We can import some assets to our content folder. We can add a feature or content pack. So if you click on this, this will actually pop open a window to add another template. So let's say we wanted to add the first person controller and character to this project. We go ahead and add that. We could also add this vehicle template as well, and that would add that extra content. And then below it, we have create new folder. So if you select this, we can actually create a new folder in our content browser. We can name this my first folder. And then basically we can double click, open it up, and create another folder or create some assets and import some assets to that folder. Below that, we have some of the most common types of assets. We have an animation blueprint. This is used specifically for animating game characters. Blueprint class, this is how you actually create blueprints and characters, all sorts of interactable objects, okay, using blueprint visual scripting. We have level. So if we want to create a new level, we could do that through here. More on that later. We have level sequence. So again, this is for cinematics and things like that. Material and material instance, we kind of gone over those. Those are for applying materials to objects. And Niagara system is a particle effect system. Okay, and down here we have more different categories. So if you see we hover over a category under animation, it's going to show us more different types of assets. So there's quite a bit of different assets in here inside of Unreal Engine. And again, you don't need to know what every single asset does and what every single asset is. You'll kind of just learn it as you get more and more familiar with the engine. So don't be too intimidated by this window. Okay, so now let's go ahead and actually import some assets to our project. Go to the description of this video and go to the Google Drive link and download the file. You should have this starter content.zip file. You just right click and extract all, and you should have this starter content folder. Okay, this starter content used to be a couple of assets that used to be in the engine. If you watch any Unreal Engine tutorial that's a year or older than that, you're likely going to see them using starter content. So they actually have this in older versions of the engine, but they removed it in 5.7 and 5.8. But we're going to go ahead and add this starter content manually to our project. So this is one of the ways you can do that. So once you've gone ahead and download and extract the files, what you can do is we're not going to drag this into our project. It's not going to let us do that. But instead, what we'll do is right click the content folder and do show and explore. This will pull up where we have our Unreal Engine project installed, specifically the content folder, which is what we want. Okay, you can see Unreal projects, the name of our project, our first project, and the content folder. We're going to take this starter content, which has architecture, audio, blueprints, all that stuff. Make sure that it's this folder right here, not this folder over here. Okay, this is very important. You want to make sure that it says starter content, and inside are the different files. So copy this folder right here and paste it into the content. You could have your project open, it's completely fine. And then double click that and make sure that there's a folder for architecture, audio, blueprints. So it's content, starter content, and just like so. Okay, this is very important because if there's an extra folder, then the references will be broken and materials and textures won't be applied to different assets. So now that we've added this manually to our project, we can go back to our project here and we should see a new folder in our content for starter content. So now we can go to starter content and we have a bunch of different folders. We have a folder for audio, which has more different types of assets like audio files. So you can play these, listen to, explosion sound effects and all that stuff. Sound waves are the audio files of the engine. Sound cues, on the other hand, are what you drag sound waves into so that they can play, random sounds or change the pitch, okay, when you play sounds in games. We have other folders for blueprints, but let's go into the props folder over here. The props folder in the starter content has some very useful props that we can mess around with. So let's go ahead and come over here into our level and start dragging some of these out. We have the static mesh chair. Okay, we can drag and drop it over here and rotate this. We have the static mesh couch, which is kind of just a chair, but scaled up like that. We even have a door frame, and also we should have a door itself. Okay, so we can go and drag that in. You can press W to move this around. And if you want your content browser to, be moved down a little bit, you can do that and adjust that. And basically we have just a couple of different assets that we can kind of just drag in here and rotate, scale around, and play with. So now let's go ahead and talk about materials. So we want to go into the materials folder in the starter content, and you'll notice that there are a bunch of different starter materials in here. So we can actually start playing around with materials. Now we can take, say, this metal gold material, and we can apply it to this shader ball over here. So we just drag and drop it on there. You can see that it applied the material. So that's basically how you can apply a material to an object. You just drag the material from the content browser and drop it onto the object like so. Now what you might notice is that this material over here only changed this outer part. It didn't change the Unreal Engine logo or this part down there. And the reason why it didn't do that is because if you select this object in the details over here, you can see that we have two different slots, material slots. So it applied that for this element 0 slot, but if we want to apply it to the other slot, we can just drag this. We can also drop it over here on this slot. You can also change materials that way by just dragging and dropping it on to the slot, just like so. Okay, so let's select this chair. You can see we have the M chair material. We can change that with this rock material. Now, when you're applying materials like this in the level, it doesn't actually change the default material. What I mean by that is if we go into the props and if we drag in the chair again, you'll notice that the chair has its default chair material. Now, if you would like to change the default material, you'd have to go and edit the static mesh, and we'll talk more about that towards the end of the video, but that is basically something to be aware of. So now that we know how to add some basic assets to our content browser, we want to go over the other different ways that you would normally add assets to your project, which is through Fab and the Epic Games launcher. So let's go ahead and talk about that next. So there's multiple different ways to access Fab or the Unreal Engine Marketplace. You can either open up a web browser, in Chrome, Edge, or Safari, and head over to fab.com. And you can go ahead and log in with your Epic Games account and start browsing Unreal Engine assets. So essentially, Fab is the marketplace where you can get assets, environments, sounds, textures, character models, all sorts of stuff for your Unreal Engine projects. Now, the important thing to note in here is once you log in to your Epic Games account, you'll see Discover, which allows you to browse different assets. We have My Library, so if you head over here, it will show you all the assets that you own. Publish, if you'd like to actually publish some assets, and we have some other tabs for Community and About. You also have over here Search, so if you want to search for, say, construction, you can search for construction-themed assets, okay? And we have some different settings here. We can filter, if we want to filter by free assets, we can filter the price over here and do show only free assets. Okay. Now, some of these assets, when we just do a broad search like this, are not necessarily Unreal Engine ready assets. Okay. What I mean by that is if you hover over some of these, it's going to say 3D, OBJ, GLTF. Basically, these are 3D formats. Okay. This is not necessarily ready for Unreal Engine. However, this asset over here, if we hover over, it says 3D. It has the Unreal Engine logo and also the Unity logo. So we know that this asset is compatible with the engine and already ready for us to import directly into the engine, okay? Now, a good way to filter by Unreal Engine compatible assets is if you just head over to Discover over here, you can just click on Unreal Engine over here, and now you're browsing only Unreal Engine assets. So this is very useful. That way you don't have to manually check and see if it's compatible, okay? Then from here, you can filter, price by free. You can set the newest or oldest or by price, and you have all those different settings. There's other different categories in here. We have, Quixel Megascans assets, which are, some free assets from Epic Games. We have UE samples. So these are like the sample projects. We also have some MetaHuman assets, which are, again, the high quality humanoid characters inside of Unreal Engine. So let's go ahead and add some assets to our Unreal Engine project. So for this, let's search for construction. And we can filter over by the price, show only free products. Now there's actually quite a bit of free stuff on here, so you don't really need to spend a whole ton of money, especially when you're just getting started, because there's already a lot of free assets that you can use to build out your projects. So over here we have this construction site volume 1. Let's go ahead and click on that, and we'll pull up the actual store page. Okay, it shows us the name of the owner of this asset pack, who created it, the name of the pack. It shows us whether we added this to our library or not. So if this is free, it'll say add to your library or check out. You'll just add it to your library, and then it should say saved in library, okay? And again, you got to make sure that you're logged into your Epic Games account. Also, you have other different information, included formats, Unreal Engine Unity, the last time they updated it. Some more important information down here is under compatibility, okay? So it shows us the supported Unreal Engine versions. This is important because right now you can see that it's only supported Unreal Engine versions 4 through 4.27, and then Unreal Engine 5.0 to 5.7. So what are we going to do? Because our Unreal Engine project is 5.8. Well, I'll show you guys how we can get around this. And it's very simple, okay? So once you've added this to your library, you can either, download it and add it to a project here. But what I like to do is I like to go to the Epic Games Launcher. So open up the Epic Games Launcher, make sure you're in the Unreal Engine tab and go over to your library. And over here under the Fab library, we can click on this refresh. And basically, whenever you claim an asset and add it to your Fab library, you want to go ahead and click on this refresh button. What it will do is it will sync your Fab library with the asset that you might have claimed. So now what we can do is, once that's done, we can search for construction. We have it over here, construction site volume 1, and we have a add to project button. So we click on that, and it will go ahead and tell us select the project to add the asset to. Now you might not see your project in this list, okay? And the reason why is because it's not a supported version. So in order to actually see our project, you want to click the show all projects, and that will actually allow us to add this asset to a unsupported project. So search for our first project. You can see the version of the project is 5.8. So if I select it, it's going to say asset is not compatible with 5.8. Please select the closest alternative version. So all you have to do in order to add it is just select this version, click the drop down, and select the last supported version, which in our case is 5.7. And now you can see that we can actually add it to our project. So just click add to project. That will go ahead and download that and add it to our project. So now that we've added that pack, we can go back to our project. And if we go to our content browser, let's just go ahead and uncollapse all of this. We should see a new folder called Construction Volume 1. And if we go in there, we have different folders. We have Meshes folder, and you can see all of the construction props that are in this pack. Now, whenever you download a asset pack online, it's going to have to compile shaders for all the assets. So if I drag in this asset, you can see that it has that checkered material. That basically just means that it's compiling the shaders for that asset, okay? So it might take a couple of seconds when you drag an asset. So now you can just drag in the assets that you want to use. And that's basically how you would normally add assets from the Fab Marketplace. Now there's two other different ways to actually do that. But that one is the one that I used. The two other ways are that you can go to the Epic Games Launcher and head over to the Fab tab, which basically is the same exact thing as the web version. I don't really like using this because, as you can see, it's very slow. It takes a long time to actually load things. Just the web experience is way more faster than this. So I usually don't use this Fab tab. The other way that you can access Fab is it's actually a plugin. So if you go to edit plugins and search for Fab, now for whatever reason I don't have Fab installed or enabled in my project, and I don't think you're going to have that issue, But if you do, you can go to the Epic Games launcher and you can come over here to your library, and you should have that, the Fab UE plugin. You just click install to engine, and you would select the engine version. Okay, I've already done that just now. And basically, you can go to edit plugins and search for the Fab plugin over here, and we can enable that and restart your project. So that's how you kind of add a plugin to your Unreal Engine project. Okay, so now that we restarted our project, we should have now Fab enabled. So if you go to the Q plus icon, you'll see now this Fab button over here. So usually you should already have Fab enabled, and also you see this Fab button. So yeah, that's probably why we didn't have it. We just didn't have the plugin installed to 5.8. So if you did run into that issue, let me know down in the comments. But basically, if we click on this, this will actually open up a built-in editor window that has Fab built into it. Okay, so we can actually browse assets through this window. And you can either take this window and dock it up here at the top and switch between your level and Fab, or you can actually take it and dock it over here in the details panel, and just like that. Okay. And again, this operates just like the web page. So you could search in here for whatever asset that you might want and add it directly to your Unreal Engine project. Now let's go ahead and talk about Megascans assets and Quixel Megascans. So before Fab, there used to be a built-in plugin for what's called Quixel Megascans. Basically, Quixel Megascans, if we go over here, we can see we have Quixel Megascans and Megaplants. What these are a collection of over 10,000 plus high quality photo scan assets. So let's say we click on this Mega Plants Norway Spruce asset. We scroll down, we can see that the seller here is Quixel Mega Plants. So let's click on that. Let's actually take this window and dock it up here at the top. So you can see we have Quixel Mega Plants, but also let's just go back real quick. Let's find Quixel Megascans. So, any of the assets in here, we can select this couch maybe. It should say Quixel Megascans now, so let's click on that. It's going to show us the library of Quixel Megascans. So again, these are high quality photo scan, actual real world objects that they've, taken a high powered camera, captured images, hundreds of images of, and recreated them in 3D. This library, there's a lot of stuff that costs money, but there's a lot of stuff that's actually free in here. So you can filter by price and only show free products. And there's actually quite a bit of free assets that you can use. We have 2.2 thousand products. So a lot of these, some of these are 3D assets. Some of them are foliage, materials, textures, all sorts of stuff in here to get you started. Also, it even has some sample project environments that are incredibly detailed. You can download and check out. But just to test this out, we can go ahead and search for, say, a rock. And since we're in the Quixel Megascans library here, it's going to only search inside of that, which is very nice. So let's say we needed a nice detailed rock for our cinematic shot. So, maybe we'll choose one of these granite rocks over here. We can see that we have actually a 3D preview. So if you click on this and click the play, it will load actual 3D preview of what the asset looks like. Now note that this is like a low quality preview. So the actual asset looks more like this, okay? Now over here, to actually add this to our project, you can select the quality. This is only specific to Quixel Megascans. So we have raw quality. Raw quality is the most detailed. Basically, it's like the raw photo scan. And this is what you'd be using with Nanite, one of Unreal Engine's features. If you're going to be creating things like cinematics and you want that, high quality asset, you can also choose low, medium, or high quality if you want to use this, for games. Let's just go ahead and choose the raw quality and click add to project. Now you might need to add this to your library first in order to do that. But once you've gone ahead and added it to your library and click add to project, you'll notice it's now downloading. Also note that since this is raw quality, it's going to take quite a long time to download. But also you can download other different types of assets through this Fab tab. So you can go ahead and browse through different asset packs and add this to your project. Again, me personally, I just like the web page better, but that's just me. Okay, so now you can see it's actually adding the asset to our project, and we just wait for it. And we should see a new folder in our content folder for Fab. And then in the Fab folder, we have another folder for Megascans, 3D, Granite Rock, and Raw. And then inside of that, we have the static mesh. Okay, so here's the actual static mesh. So let's go ahead and just drag this guy in here. Okay, so it's kind of small. Let's go ahead and just scale this thing up. But what you'll notice is this asset actually has Nanite enabled. Okay, so this asset is a raw photo scan asset, and this detail over here, if you notice, if we actually zoom in, is incredibly detailed. Okay, and in order to actually see how detailed this asset is, if we were to go into the view mode, changes from lit to wireframe only, you'll notice that there are, thousands of triangles that actually make up this asset. Okay, and normally you wouldn't see that if you're messing around with the other assets over here, because these are more optimized towards, game usage. But these raw photo scan assets are more or less used for things like cinematics. So there's a massive library of these assets. You just need to go over to the Quixel Megascans and Megaplants. You can go over to the profile over here and you can start browsing by free products, and there's a bunch of these assets to use. So let's go ahead and just delete this, and I'm going to close the Fab tab over there. Now we're going to pivot to sub-editors in the engine. So if I take my content drawer and dock this in the layout, we're going to talk about some of the different sub-editors. So what I mean by that is if we go into our starter content, go to props, and open up this static mesh chair. If we double click and open this up, it's going to pop open a sub editor. Basically, this is the static mesh editor window. And we can take this window, and I usually like to dock this here at the top. But inside of it, this allows us to actually preview what the mesh looks like. So we have a viewport over here we can move around, just like a regular viewport. We have all of the different viewport controls up here at the top. And then we have other different things down here, like some information about the model, how many triangles, vertices it has, and all that stuff, okay? Now up here at the top, we can change different settings for our mesh, like collision. This is very important for games. And then over here on the right, we have details panel, which allows us to change things like the default material and other various different settings, okay? So let's say we wanted to change this chair's default material. How would we actually do that? Well, we can go over here to the material and click the drop down and search for a material that we want to set. So let's say we want to search for the gold material. We can select that. And now in order for us to save the change, we'll click this save icon up here at the top. And if we go back to our third person level and in our content browser, you'll see that the mesh preview updated. It's now colored with this gold. And if I actually drag this asset in the level, it is now this golden chair. Okay, so if I drag it, multiple times, you can see that the default material is now set to that gold material. Okay, so basically the static mesh editor, this sub-editor allows you to modify default settings and parameters for that specific asset. Okay, so that is the static mesh editor. There's lots of other different editors. There's also material editor. So for that, we can go to our folder here. Let's right click and create a new folder. Name this, maybe test content, and just double click open this up. And then in here we can right click and create a new material. And whenever you're naming your materials, you want to follow the Unreal Engine naming convention, which is m underscore and then the material name. So we can name this our first material. But basically there is a naming convention that you can follow, and it is listed in the documentation for naming your assets. You'll notice that it has this little star icon. That just means that it hasn't been saved yet. So you want to do a file, save all. And then we can go ahead and actually double click to open the material sub editor. So this is the material sub editor. Again, we can take this window and dock it up here at the top. And if you don't like having to manually dock this at the top every single time when you open up an asset, okay, one thing I like to do is go to edit, editor preferences, and down here we have the asset editor open location. You can change this to the main window, okay? What that will do is it'll automatically dock this at the top, okay? That's just something I like to do in my projects. But in this material editor, basically we have a viewport over here. Again, we can scroll in and out. Hold down left mouse button to rotate around. We have some different buttons over here for our viewport. We can preview the material on different types of shapes, and it's a very basic viewport. Now over here in the center of our screen is the graph. The graph basically allows us to change the values and properties of our material. Okay, and then down here in the bottom left, we have the details panel, which again allows us to change different types of properties. So let's go ahead and actually create our very first material by changing the color of this material. So over here under the base color, this is what actually changes the overall color and texture of our material. So we can click on this little black square and we can now change the color of our material. So let's say we want a bright blue color, click OK. And now you can see that it has updated the preview window. Again, we can see what this looks like with different types of shapes over here. And that is basically our first material. So now you just save that. It's going to go ahead and save that. We can close out of here. And now we have our very first material, which we can apply to different objects. So we just drag and drop it. And now we can apply our material just like so. So those are some of the basic sub-editors. There's many other different types of sub-editors in the engine. And again, you'll just become more and more familiar with them as you use Unreal Engine. Okay, so next up, let's go ahead and talk about creating levels and new levels. Currently, right now, we're in our third person level. And if we want to create a new level, there's two different ways of doing this. We can either go to File, New Level, and that will pop open this window that allows us to choose different templates to pick from. Okay, we have open world, empty open world, basic, or empty level. Okay, we can also right click anywhere in the content folder and create a level. However, this will create a completely blank level. So if you want a level with lighting, you can just go to File, New Level, and select Basic over here. Okay, you don't want to do open world unless you want a open world game. So we're going to choose Basic and click Create. And in order to actually save this level to our content folder, you want to go to File and Save Current Level As, and choose a location where you want to save this map. Okay, we can choose the content folder, or we can right click, create a new folder, name this our maps, open that up, and we can save this new map, click Save, and we'll go ahead and save this new map like so. So here's our new level in here, and we have some basic lighting and just a little playground that we can go ahead and mess around with. So that is how you basically create a new level. And if we want to go back to our previous level, we can go to the content drawer and look for that level. So I think it's in third person, and we have third person level, so we can double click and open that, and that's how you load that level. Okay, you just navigate to it and double click to open it up. Okay, just like that. So now in our third person level, let's go ahead and pivot this tutorial and talk about blueprints, because blueprints are the visual scripting system of Unreal Engine. You either have blueprints or C++. Technically, you can also use both, but essentially blueprints are the visual scripting system of Unreal Engine. It's a very powerful node-based approach to making games and interactive experiences without having to write traditional code. So in order to actually see what a blueprint looks like, let's go to our content drawer here, dock this in layout, and let's go to our third person folder, blueprints. And you can see that we have a couple of different blueprint assets in this folder. We have this third person character blueprint, and we also have these other two blueprints. Let's focus on the character first. So when we actually play our game in here, let me just clear all this stuff. Let's click play. We have this very simple character that we can move a camera around. We can jump, move around, run around. This is all powered and created by blueprints. And the reason why we know that is in our content drawer, we have that third person character blueprint. So if we actually double click and open this up, this is going to open up the blueprint sub editor. And basically the blueprint editor, to give you the basic rundown of this, we have in the center of the screen, the graph. Okay, so we can zoom in and out. In here, we have different tabs. Okay, so if right now we're in the event graph, we can head over to the viewport, which kind of shows us what this blueprint consists of, visually. So in our case, this is our character. So we have this character mesh. We can select it. We have this little capsule collision. We also have this little camera over here. This is the camera we're viewing our character with. You'll notice that when we select different objects, it highlights in this components tab. Basically, you can think of components similar to like the world outliner. It just has a list of different things that make up our character. We have the camera, we have the mesh, we have the capsule component, all that stuff. And you'll notice when we select different objects, also we have a details panel that show us, location, rotation, the mesh, the materials, all those details that we normally have, okay? Down here, we have this blueprint tab. This is where you'd actually add variables and information about your character. Okay, so let's head back over to this event graph over here. This is where you actually have all the programming logic done. So over here, we have a couple of different movement nodes. So if you right click, you can actually pan around and middle mouse button to zoom. You'll notice that we have inputs for looking, with our camera. We have movement inputs for moving with our WASD. And if we look down here, we have jump inputs. So basically all of the logic that drives our character are just these nodes calling these functions. So these inputs, they're highlighted in red, and these functions are highlighted in blue. You can see when we jump, we're calling the start jump, jumping our character. When it's completed, when we stop jumping, when we stop pressing the space bar, it's going to stop jumping. Okay, so it's very simple how this is set up, and it uses these nodes connected by wires. So let's go ahead and actually create our very first blueprint. So let's close out of this character, and let's go to our content drawer here and dock this in the layout. And let's create our own blueprint class. So we can right click and create a blueprint class over here. So that will create the asset. It'll pop open with this separate window, which allows us to pick a parent class. So we can go ahead and select a parent class that we want to create a blueprint of. You'll notice that there's actor, pawn, character, player controller, game mode. Basically, actor is the most simplest version of a blueprint. It can basically be spawned in the world. So you'll use the actor parent class. So you'll use this actor template if you want to create like a door that's interactable, something that you want to have some sort of blueprint logic paired to. We have pawn, which is something that you want to possess, but not necessarily a character. Okay, so this can be used for things like cars, vehicles, planes, all sorts of stuff like that. Character is, actual playable character that you can actually play. So like our third person character, you'll create that. Player controller, this class handles controlling the character. This is more towards, multiplayer games, things like that. As you can see in this project, it has a custom third person player controller. Okay. We have game mode base. Basically, the game mode is, again, more towards multiplayer games, but basically this class defines the rules of the game if we're going to be making a game that has scoring and all that stuff. Actor component, this is like a custom component that you can add to your character. And then we have a scene component, okay? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna choose the most basic blueprint, which is an actor, the most common one, and it's gonna add that blueprint class down there. We can name this BP underscore for blueprint, and then we can name this, my first blueprint actor, okay? My first blueprint actor. You'll see that we need to save this. Let's do File, Save All, and then we can just double click and open this up. So when you first open this up, it'll take us to the viewport. You can see that there's no visual representation to this blueprint. So right now there's nothing going on in here. We can add a visual representation if we want to add like a mesh by going over to the components. So if we click on the plus icon, we can add all sorts of things in here like audio, a light, a skeleton mesh, which would be like a character mesh, static mesh would be like a prop, and other different types of stuff in here. So let's just choose a simple cube, maybe, okay, just like that. And now we actually have a visual representation of this cube. Okay, we can move the cube around in here, but let's go ahead and whenever you add something or make any changes in your blueprint, you want to hit the compile button so that it goes green just like that. Let's go ahead and actually add basic logic. So let's head over to the event graph. The event graph is where we want to actually add our programming logic and all that stuff. And you'll notice that this blueprint, when we create it, comes with these 3 different nodes automatically. We have the event begin play. So let's talk about this one first. If we drag this one up here, you'll notice that it's currently grayed out. So what you can do is drag off of here, and you'll see that it creates this wire. And when you drop it on the graph, it'll pop open with this long list, okay? So we have different types of nodes that we can add and hook up to the event begin play. So the node we want to search for is called the print string. So we have development print string, and go ahead and select that. And now you'll notice that it ungrayed out the event begin play. And basically what this is doing is we have the event begin play, which calls when we play the game. So when we hit that green play button, this node fires off whatever is connected to it. So you can see this wire that's connecting to this print string. Basically what this is going to do is just print off this text over here which says hello. So now that we've hooked this up and hooked this up to our event begin play, we can hit this compile button and save that. And now if we go to our third person, in order to actually spawn this into our level or drag this into a level, we just need to drag it and drop it like so. Okay, let's maybe move this over here. But we need to actually place it in the level in order for this event begin play print string to fire off. So now let's go ahead and hit this play button. And you'll notice in the top left, it says hello. It's very quick. So click stop, play again. You'll notice it says hello. Well, that's our very first blueprint. Okay. So we go into our blueprint actor. Basically, it's just when we play the game, it's calling this node, which says hello. Okay, we could change the text in here. We could say hello world. And whenever we do any changes in here, make sure you compile and save. And it has the little green icon, which means everything's good to go. Go back to our level, hit play. You can see it says hello world, our new text. So blueprints are very nice because it's incredibly simple to build out game logic like this by just connecting different nodes with wires. And in fact, there have been a lot of games, successful games like Expedition 33, which was made and comprised of 95% blueprints. So it's definitely something that you can do. You can make full games using blueprints. Okay, so those are the basics of blueprints. We can go ahead and close out of here. And now let's go ahead and talk about some of Unreal Engine 5's flagship features like Lumen and Nanite. So first off, let's talk about Lumen. If you don't know what Lumen is, it's the global illumination system inside of Unreal Engine. It allows us to have real-time dynamic lighting in our game or in our cinematic shot. So essentially, if I zoom over here, you'll notice that this bright green cube is bounce lighting and reflecting some green light onto this gray cube over here. That is what global illumination does. It creates sort of like this bounce lighting. When the light hits this, it bounces off and reflects light onto other objects. Okay, that's what global illumination does. Previously in Unreal Engine 4, the older engine, it didn't have dynamic global illumination or bounce lighting, and so you'd have to manually bake the lighting info onto objects to fake this effect. But with Unreal Engine 5, we have this feature enabled by default. Right, so this feature is enabled. You can turn it off and you can switch to baked lighting. Lumen is used mainly for if you want to have, dynamic lighting that changes and also that bounce lighting. If you hit Control and L, you'll get this little gizmo that allows you to actually change the time of day. So if you want to have like a sunset, you could do that. And you can see that it automatically changes this lighting in our scene, okay? And typically, if you don't have global illumination, this area over here would be very dark, okay, because there's no light bouncing. But since we have that nice soft bounce light, we're getting this nice lit area, okay, even though there's no light directly hitting that area. So that is basically Lumen in a nutshell. Again, you can disable this feature if you want more performance because dynamic global illumination can be very heavy, especially for games. However, in Unreal Engine 5.8, they actually have a light version of Lumen. So they're actively working on making it more performant. But the other main feature that Unreal Engine has or Unreal Engine 5 introduces is Nanite, which we've kind of already discussed. Basically, if we go to our Fab content, Megascans 3D Rock that we downloaded, if we go to the static mesh and drag this in and scale this guy up, you'll notice that again, we have that highly detailed raw photo scan asset that consists of tons of triangles. So if we go in the wireframe, you can see that it has thousands upon thousands of triangles. Normally, if you just had this asset in Blender, it'd be very laggy. Like if you have a mesh in Blender that has millions of triangles, it would just absolutely crash the program. But with Unreal Engine 5, there's this feature called Nanite, which allows you to have assets that are basically raw photo scan, like this detail, and it automatically creates this transition for that. So what I mean by that is traditionally in games, you'd have a detailed mesh. So say, for example, we have this chair. Let's say this chair is super detailed. The further away we get from this object, in video games, it's typically supposed to swap this object over here for a lower quality asset, okay, lower geometry asset. That way you can save performance. With Nanite, Nanite is basically doing that, but it automatically does that in the backend. And actually, to view this, if we go into the lit view, we can go into Nanite visualization and look at the clusters. And you can see if we zoom in, it turns into these smaller clusters. But if we zoom out, you can see what it's doing is basically replacing them with larger clusters. Okay. So essentially what it's doing is it's sort of like simplifying the geometry the farther away you get from that object. So essentially that's what Nanite does. It's supposed to automatically reduce the triangle count the further away you get from an object. Now this can be performance heavy in games, especially if you have lots of assets like this. And if you're going to be using Nanite in your project, you want everything to have Nanite enabled, because there's a base cost associated with that. But mainly for films and cinematics, you don't have to worry about that. You can enable Nanite on your assets, use these high quality photo scans. You won't have to worry about performance. But in games, what you'll have instead are LODs, which basically are level of details. So for this asset, if I browse to it and open it up in the viewport, you can see that we have LOD 0. Okay, so the further we get away from this asset, I don't actually think there's any LODs for this. However, we could create an LOD by going to the details over here. And under LOD, we could go ahead and increase the number of LODs to say 5 and click apply changes. That will go ahead and automatically create those LODs for us. So now if we focus in, you can see we're on LOD 0. If I get further away, it's LOD 1. And you'll notice that the triangle count reduces the further away we get from the object and switching the LOD. So LOD 1 is now 700 triangles, LOD 2 is 400, LOD 3 is 200, and so on. Okay, so LODs are basically what you use in games. Nanites, you can use that in films. Now you can use Nanite in games, but again, there are some performance costs with that. So yeah, those are the basics of Unreal Engine 5. We've gone over the viewport, all those scaling controls. We've gone over the different view modes. We've gone over all of the different editor settings, the windows, how you can change the different, editing modes, how to actually add assets to your content browser. We've gone over the details panel, world outliner, and also Fab and Quixel assets, as well as blueprints, Nanite, and Lumen. So in my next tutorial in this beginner's course series, we're going to cover over blueprints more in depth because there's a lot of things you can actually do with blueprints, like make games. But even if you don't want to use blueprints for games, you can still use it as a powerful scripting tool to create interactable objects and many other different things. So if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure that you leave a like and subscribe. And also, if you want to see some of my other premium courses, you can check them out, link in the description below, or head over to smartpoly.teachable.com to learn more. But that's pretty much it for this video. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one.